Well, hello, I'm Ben Fraser. I'm the industry vertical lead at Endava, and welcome. This is our inaugural episode of something we're calling Insurance Assessed. It's a brief podcast really, just to help provide some insights into some of the issues that we see facing insurers across the globe, as well as exploring some of the latest innovations that we help our clients with in the insurance sector. And I'm joined today by Bradley. I'll introduce Bradley. He's our VP of Industry Acceleration. Today specifically, we're going to be talking about RPA, Robotic Process Automation. Throughout the series, we're talking about a bunch of different areas: low code, no code, digital self-service, using AI for better underwriting and pricing decisions. But today, very much focused around RPA. Bradley, anything you want to say to introduce yourself and your role?
We both specialise in insurance. I think that you talked about the industry vertical without mentioning insurance. So thanks for inviting me along.
Okay. So let's get on to the topic at hand. RPA, Robotic Process Automation. Bradley, in a nutshell, what is it?
So RPA is a way that you can automate processes. In your Microsoft Office applications, it's called macros, where you can record certain keystrokes and what have you, in order to speed up some of those mundane tasks that just take a long time, or you might miss key, etc. In businesses, they're really good at automating some of those kind of legacy processes on legacy systems that are very repetitive, and they mimic how humans would normally click or tab onto a certain field, or copy and paste between applications. So they really replace those time-consuming, highly repetitive, where there's a high risk of miskeying or mispasting, and ultimately result in a faster user experience for end users.
Awesome. And how do we think, what's your view on how it helps us in the insurance industry more specifically?
Yeah, so that's a really good question for insurance. So insurance companies generally have quite a lot of legacy processes and legacy systems that are quite difficult to integrate with. AS400s, for example, or legacy applications that don't have APIs and what have you as well. So we've got one particular insurance client that they've got about 100 RPA processes. We started working with them a few years ago, and we keep a record of every one of those processes, along with, for each of the processes, we also say how many FTEs or full-time equivalents, how many man days there are that's been replaced by each of those processes. What we also do is we record the time, the date stamp of when we started implementing that RPA process there as well. And I'll probably talk a bit about that later. It's basically so that you can keep reviewing it as time goes on. So what we do is we keep a record of all the RPA processes for this client. And some of those processes are just a few hours. Some of them are under an hour, but some of them are more than 2.5 days, where there can be quite a complex process that require lots of different systems, waiting on people, etc. And these processes just kind of run in the background. Shall I talk about one of them in particular?
Yeah, I think that'd be useful. I think it would be good perhaps to give a quick sense of what parts of the sort of landscape within that insurer the processes are happening in, because it's pretty wide, isn't it? Right, it goes across claims right through to sort of financial, some policy admin stuff as well. So it's pretty broad, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the processes, and this is one of the larger FT replacements, is an FNOL process. So what happens is, when a customer wants to make a claim, or FNOL is first notification of loss, when a customer wants to make a claim, they're asked to download a PDF from the website. And what they used to do, so pre-RPA, is that they'd download the PDF, they'd fill it in manually, they would put it in the post to the insurance headquarters. Someone in HQ would then review the form, make sure that it's been filled in correctly. If it was, they would then send it off to another office of the insurance company, who would then key it into several systems, and it actually got rekeyed after that as well. So you can hear that there's lots of different processes, and none of them are kind of, brain surgery type level of attention to detail, etc. So what we did is that we produced an RPA process that could check that the form had been filled in correctly. So it was obviously scanned when it was received. At that point, the RPA process took over. We checked that all the forms, all the fields, were completed. We then, using optical character recognition, could enter the detail into some of the databases. It was then managed to move around what used to be different offices, and we could move it into other databases thereafter as well. And then finally, it also kicked off writing a solicitor's letter if certain conditions had been met as well. Now, before anybody says anything, obviously, the best solution here would be to have kind of a claims mobile app or an FNOL mobile app where someone can download it to their phone and select, I don't know, the panels that have been impacted from an accident. They could click on those panels and that would be uploaded already in a digital format to the insurance company. Of course, that's the better solution. But in the absence of producing that app with all the interfaces required into the databases, which this particular insurance company would be unable to support that in their current systems. But in the absence of being able to do that, the next best thing for the end customer is to fill in that downloaded PDF, send it off, and then it all automatically gets taken care of by the insurance company.
And I think it's safe to say there's other programs of work looking at that FNOL you described, right, and fixing the fundamental problem rather than doing what we're doing here, which is fixing a broken element within a process and making massive improvements.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. So it's clear that the possibilities opened up by modern automation tech, quite exciting opportunity for IT and the wider organisations alike. Can also present, I guess, some challenges, and I'm sure we've learned the hard way on some of those. Bradley, if you were to perhaps identify, based on some of our specific learnings, what the top three things to avoid would be, what would you say?
Yeah, so it's always difficult to prioritize those into the top three, but I'll have a go here. So the top three that I would say, one is targeting your RPA system at the wrong processes, as in prioritizing which of your manual processes you're going to look at first. The second one is using the wrong delivery methodology. I'll probably talk about that in a bit more detail. And then the third is thinking that RPA is all that's needed in order to achieve some kind of return on investment. Yeah. So if I pick on each of those, so going with the first one, targeting RPA at the wrong processes. So it's really important to focus on which of your processes you want to tackle first. So we would recommend that you tackle your really complex processes once your RPA mature. Once you've developed some of the actual RPA processes, you've deployed them to live, you've learned some of the lessons, you've maybe already improved some of the early ones, only then start tackling the really complex ones that you can do. What you really want to be kind of aiming for with this balance is what is the highest value and the easiest processes to replace first. It requires some level of kind of discovery work because it might be a very quick process, but actually gives a much better end customer experience, or it might be a very time intensive process, but isn't particularly difficult for an RPA tool to be able to mimic that.
Mm-hmm. And then the second one you were talking about was potentially using the wrong delivery methodology. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Endava, at Endava, Agile is at our core. We really like the iterative approach. So we would always recommend that you start implementing your RPA processes in a number of different kind of releases or iterations. So start off with some of the simple work. Maybe it's the start of the process, but sometimes it's actually the very end of the process. We've done that for other clients. So start off with some of it, release it, see how you get on, then develop it a bit further, then build on more functionality and more functionality. It's still the same RPA process, but you kind of want to start small and then build it out over time. rather than the opposite to that would be like a waterfall or a big bang approach, which is let's do all the bells and whistles of this RPA process, launch it live, and then wait and see what happens. Actually, the team has now moved on to yet another RPA process, etc. So you really want to get that balance right.
And is it safe to say, you know, from the sort of discovery activity that you described, yeah, where we're talking about methodology, we're also talking about the appropriate tooling as well? Because I know that in certain instances, you know, we've looked at the off-the-shelf RPA tools, which are amazing at some of the things that they are designed to do, but you don't always need them for simple scripting automation. I know we've done that in the space as well.
So I think the client example you're talking about there, where we went in together, and the client was looking at which of the off-the-shelf platforms to use, and actually some of the processes were very simple. In fact, the majority of them were at that point, and we were recommending you don't need this sledgehammer type application to crack your this nut of some of the processes. So we did some analysis, and we realized that actually just a very quick, simple, bespoke tool would be able to cover all of their RPA processes, and still to this day, it's still that bespoke tool. Now, there is definitely a place for some of the really good off-the-shelf vendors at the moment in the RPA space. Absolutely. We're just saying that not every company needs to have those. And insurance companies in particular, they've got lots of legacy technologies and legacy platforms that have been kind of built upon over the years. And often they find themselves trying to work out how to consolidate some of those so they have less legacy going forward. Now, sometimes it works with another off-the-shelf vendor, and sometimes it works with that bespoke solution there as well. It's probably also worth saying that if you're thinking about changing existing systems, then RPA, well, it probably isn't the right tool to do it, because RPA is there, as I said at the very beginning, to script what you have at the moment with the processes that you have at the moment, maybe tweak some of them. But what you don't want to start doing is asking other departments and other parts of a digital transformation program to make massive changes to their systems so that your RPA implementation can work. And I should have outlined this at the beginning of the call. The RPA is a tactical solution. It's a sticking plaster to a problem, which is lots of legacy applications that require lots of copying and pasting to different systems or different databases. What the ultimate solution is, of course, is to replace those myriad of systems with really good APIs, with really good microservices, et cetera, really well architected new systems. But it's not always possible to do that. And sometimes there isn't really an ROI case in order to do that. So sometimes we talk about the sticking plaster of RPA, replace the people that are currently working on the current repetitive, mundane tasks, etc. Create these scripts to replace those, and then move to a well-architected system over time. And I'm not suggesting for a second, of course, about removing those people whatsoever. Often they're the people that have got some really good knowledge about how the business really works at a really fine detail. They are excellent for working on some of the outlying cases, some of the real deep business knowledge there as well.
It means you can get involved in more value add and more interesting stuff, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Hopefully you want everyone to feel better.
Sorry, go
on. Then the third of the challenges is thinking that RPA is all that's needed to achieve a good return on investment. RPA is not the be-all and end-all, and it shouldn't be seen as the final state of how you've integrated your systems, because you haven't integrated those systems. What you really want to do is look at how you can re-architect those over time. What you really want to be doing is using RPA to create scripts to automate the simple processes, and then add on additional technologies, machine learning or other bot technologies, natural language processing, which we talked a little bit about before with OCR technology. You want to blend those together, and that's what the industry calls smart automation, which is you've managed to remove some of the human frailties really from those processes, but embellish it with some of those great technology advances.
Superb. So, I mean, we did describe this at the start as a sort of brief podcast. So, in conclusion, then, if you were to sort of summarise the overall impact on cost reduction, customer service, how would you describe that in terms of the benefits for RPA?
Yeah, so first of all, I would definitely recommend, like we did, creating a spreadsheet of all the different RPA processes, because then what you can do is now, a couple of years later after we did that implementation that we talked about, I can now look at that spreadsheet and go, wow, there's like 100 processes in here. You can start adding them all together. You can start seeing how many FNORs come in that use that process, and you can really track that ROI. It's done really well. But we've only been focusing on this conversation with those FTE savings. I think there's another massive benefit as well, which is to the end customer, because when you implement RPA on your back-end systems, we've got processes that used to take a person those 2.5 man days, or it might have, we've got other smaller tasks that might have taken, I don't know, quarter of an hour in order to do, but are now done in seconds. Yeah. And actually, there's never a mistake. There's never a copy and paste error. There's never a mistyping or anything. So the data is always accurate. And to the end customer, to us, whether that's in a B2B setting or a B2C setting, to the end customer, it's just nice that the insurance companies always get it right. It's always correct, and that nothing's been misunderstood. So it's faster for the end customer, and it's a high quality solution in there as well.
Especially if they're in a a relatively high stress situation. They've had a traffic accident, or they're trying to do claims and assistance from abroad or something.
Yeah, I mean, even in a cyber claim as well, where it's in commercial, knowing that you've to the end customer, you've made the claim once, and then it just goes through, and then you get basically the payment come through. That's a much nicer experience than behind the scenes, where it's been done manually, so mistakes get introduced, and then there's a delay in payment, etc. So it's a much nicer experience all round. Fantastic.
So thank you, Bradley. Thank you for your time today, and thanks everyone for joining us for a brief chat on RPA and some of the work that we've done. There's lots more information we've got on the automation solutions we deliver. Please get in touch via the Contact Us link or via the Smart link to view some of the other informative collateral on this topic. And yeah, make sure you tune in for the next episode. I think it's about data-driven insurance with some other special guests. So thanks for joining.
Thank you.